guys, it's Joe and Justin with Tuning Tuesday, episode 24. We just got back from Shelby Fest. Anything we want to talk about Shelby Fest? Some of the stuff that went down there?
I think we'll touch on Shelby Fest. So we got a ton of viewers already. Mm-hmm. We wanted to kind of focus the content today, and we're still talking about tuning. Bring all your tuning questions, bring all your horsepower questions, but bring up the subject of NA power. How do people make power naturally aspirated? So we'll talk a little bit about that, and counting the gains in the Summit catalog type of stuff, and then what really makes power, and we'll just talk about Shelby Fest too, a little bit of everything.
All the stuff. So where do you want to start with that?
Well, we just got back from Shelby Fest in Jefferson City, Missouri. Mm-hmm. Joe, how long have you been going?
4 years. I think this was my 4th year.
I've been going 8 years, but I missed 2 years. There's a great NMRA race at Maple Grove. Happens the same weekend as Shelby Fest quite often, so forced to make a choice. But this year we chose Shelby Fest.
Yeah. Did all the things with the... So essentially what we do at Shelby Fest is we bring the dyno out there and we offer installations and dyno tuning for customers in the, I guess that would be the greater Midwest.
Yeah, I mean actually Shelby Fest is, kind of the farthest west we go.
Besides SEMA?
Yeah, besides SEMA and like Texas, but we haven't taken the dyno to Texas in a couple of years.
Yeah. Essentially it's a big gathering of Shelbys, Mustangs. Kyle Caraway puts on the event. We go out there, we show of force, dyno, and install some stuff, make some power out in the Midwest.
Yeah, so I mean our dyno's on wheels, so it's not a big deal to drag it out there. I mean it is kind of a big deal, but we get out there, we tune some cars on 91 octane, listen to a little bit of knock pre-ignition.
Yeah. I didn't hear a lot of it this year.
Yeah, a lot. There's apparently a 93 octane station in town.
Okay.
A lot of people were going there.
Yeah. We did a red 99 Cobra while we were out there that was previously naturally aspirated for the sake of talking about naturally aspirated stuff. It's a 10 to 1 motor on 93 with a Whipple at 13 pounds. It made like 520, I believe.
Yeah, 520 with
really conservative timing.
Conservative tune. It's like an open track road race car. Mm-hmm. We saw it. You saw it in the opening screen there, and it was pretty sweet. Joe and I both kind of have had cars, SN95 cars in the past as our first Mustangs. So very simple computer system. Doesn't have wide bands, doesn't have some of the safety factors, but you put something in and you usually get the end result.
Exactly. Adding airflow.
Yeah. It doesn't have like 10 or 20 different timing modifiers and very complicated knock strategies and stuff like that.
Yeah. We got a couple GT500s while we were out there. I should say more than a couple.
There were some sweet ass black GT500s, all black, no stripes.
Yeah, they were everywhere, surprisingly.
Yeah.
Then a black one, no stripe with red inserts on the seats.
And then I'm like, man, I really want one of these. And I remembered I have one.
Yep, you have a black 1112 now.
Yes, with red stripes.
Yeah.
I never cared for the performance pack stripes.
I didn't either. I just like performance packs more.
Yeah.
So if it has to have stripes, all right, cool, I'll take it. But I'd like striped elite cars more than anything else.
So yeah, we made some awesome power at Shelby Fest on a couple cars. Had a bolt-on 07 to 09 make 565 variable horsepower. Had another one making the 570s. Mm-hmm. Basically, if you have a GT500 stock, the hot ticket is pulley, tune, cold air, and for a little icing on the cake, like a twin 67 throttle body. Mm-hmm. Well, we've been live for a few minutes here, and we got a ton of video, a ton of subscribers on the live feed videos. So I think we should start going into the topic at hand.
All the naturally aspirated horsepowers. How many atmospheres can you add without adding atmosphere?
So I think what you're talking about is calculated load or volumetric efficiency.
Volumetric efficiency and basically ambient air pressure or barometric pressure.
So in terms of tuning, when you're looking at a data log, there's a parameter called load. Mm-hmm. The computer knows engine displacement, it knows airflow from the mass air, so it calculates a cylinder fill percentage. With boost, it's easy to get over 100%, but naturally aspirated, you know, not so much.
Yeah, I mean, stock with the stock cold air intake and the correct load calculation, you can get it to crease over like 1.05 on a 15 to 17. So with your cam timing and what you're able to do with TI-VCT, you're actually filling the cylinder more than what should physically, by old convention, be possible.
That's awesome.
It's very fancy. But the easiest, you want to discuss the easiest way to make power with a naturally aspirated car? That I feel like people overlook a lot.
That's true.
Octane.
Yes, the most obvious choice is the one right in front of you.
Yep, octane. People try to make, I want to make 600 wheel naturally aspirated in 91. Not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, not even just octane, but fuel.
Yep.
There's fuel that contains extra oxygen.
Yep, it's out there.
Yeah.
It's hiding. It's inside.
Yeah. It's, I think it's usually a yellow handle.
Yeah.
Yeah. So E85 makes more power naturally aspirated too. The gains aren't as huge as on a power adder car, but what would you say they are, wheel horsepower wise?
Do you want to use a standard of like 15 to 17 Mustang?
That's a pretty good place that everybody lives right about now.
If you're on 93, 10 to 15 horsepower. If you're on 91, 20, 25 horsepower.
Yeah. And I mean, make sure, so if corn is available to you, it makes your tuner's job a lot easier, in my opinion.
Yeah, and in some ways not. From a power standpoint, it's a lot easier to get power out of E85 than it is a 91 or 93 octane fuel. But it also depends on how good your 93 is. Your gains on 90, going from 93 to 85 may not be that high if you have really sweet 93 where you're at and you're already running what we'll call it 27 degrees of timing.
Yeah.
Up around 28. I've seen some 93 octane cars up around 30, and it's like, all right, well, if you go to E85, you're not going to gain much. Your car will be more consistent from a timing standpoint, but peak power, you're not going to gain too much.
Well, and consistency is important too.
Yeah.
You know, not hitting that knock sensor in the middle of a race, and you know, your tuner not having to worry about octane as much is just going to make everything better.
Exactly.
Now,
I'd say the only other place to go from there is the most common topic, intake manifolds.
Yeah, I got a call a couple weeks ago from a customer, should I sell my GT350 intake manifold?
I think I know who that customer was.
Yes, yes. I actually ran into him driving home from Shelby Fest from the airport.
That happens every time I'm leaving an event. I think Bowling Green last year, I ran into him at a gas station in the Panhandle.
Oh, wow.
We're like up right around the border between Georgia and Florida. I'm like, how the hell
so
do I run
crazy.
into you here? Neither of us live here.
Yeah, yeah.
And neither of us went to the same event.
So when the Coyote first came out, like the first couple of years, there were only a few intake manifold options. A Boss intake manifold, and then the Cobra Jet came out. It's like, whoa, you know, and like now there's a bazillion freaking intakes.
You got Holly Sniper.
Yeah.
And then 18 manifold. You had guys for a while that were thinking about swapping 15 to 17 manifolds on their 11 to 14.
Right.
And now you got the guys that want to swap the 18 manifold onto their 15 to 17 and 11 to 14. And then I want to say there's another intake manifold out there.
The GT350.
Yeah. And then, well, there's another aluminum one.
Oh, yeah. There's last year or two at PRI, everybody's got their aluminum intake manifold on display for the Coyote. It was like a big thing, so we never had them. And then I think everybody kind of found out they weren't that great.
Yeah, that they physically work.
Yeah.
But is the power gain enough to justify spending that much on an intake manifold?
I think I'm going to take a plastic intake manifold any day of the week.
I as well.
It doesn't hold heat. The factory, I mean, Ford's killing it with stuff like the Cobra Jet, the GT350, and the 18 intake manifold is just flipping insane.
Yeah, and if you're not going to run over 25 pounds of boost with turbo, Century, whatever you're doing there, I don't really see the utility to running anything other than the plastic.
Plastic holds it just fine.
Yeah.
And we've actually been working with a company that ports the plastic intake manifolds.
And is there a specific intake we're working on them with?
Basically all of them.
Okay.
We're looking at getting samples of those in so we can dyno test all of them. But you know, he's told me there's some room for improvement on some of them.
And you said dyno test, so I'm sure there's about 100 people behind the camera right now salivating of a dyno test of all the manifolds.
Well, let's ask them. Do they want to see us dyno test the manifolds on a common NA setup?
Although it's worth saying, we've already done it.
We have done some dyno testing already, and I should say that. Do you want to see a really, really thorough dyno test, like ported, non-ported? Because Chris, you want to cue the 2018 manifold graph?
That should be the PDF that I added this morning. Yep, it's 15 GT.
They're watching a video.
And what you guys should be able to see on the screen now is an intake manifold test I did where the only thing that we changed was the intake manifold. The car had long tubes and a cold air intake on it already, and it was on E85. We did a baseline E85 with the 15 intake manifold and swapped it to an 18 intake manifold. And I want to say the gains were around 23 horsepower. I don't know if you could do some quick math there.
Yeah, I mean, in peak-to-peak gains are, yeah, Joe, you're right, about 25 horsepower. Area under the curve, and this is the kicker, no loss in torque.
Yeah.
Now, that's wide open throttle torque. It may feel like a little bit softer at part throttle, but who cares?
And it's worth saying I didn't give this car all of it. I did it to try and be consistent with one manifold to the other.
So you're saying like you kind of locked down timing so it didn't change from test to test?
Exactly.
Okay, so that's what it's got to be what you got to do.
Apples to oranges or apples to apples.
To have a good test, yeah.
We've got a lot of people chiming in that are saying yes, definitely they would love to see a dyno comparison on the intakes.
Okay, on like and like Joe said, we've already done that, but there's more stuff we could compare.
There's more manifolds out now as compared with when we did it last.
And they're also suggesting ported versus unported as well, where we're able to.
And we've already done a little bit of research on the porting. Like the GT350 intake manifold is actually a really nice factory piece. You're getting your money's worth for what, $1,200 that they cost.
Yeah.
But some of the GT intake manifolds and even the Boss and the Cobra Jet, there is room for improvement with porting. You know, a good porter looks at a lot of different things. The injector pocket actually sits right in the middle of the airstream.
Yeah.
So you got to get the air around it and into the cylinder head. And Joe, you mentioned the tuning aspect of just when you were testing this stuff. You know, in my experience, it's pretty easy to do apples to apples tests with these intake manifolds.
It is.
You don't have a lot of variables. NA cars are pretty consistent.
Yeah, all you got to do is lock timing somewhere you know to be safe, and just make sure that it sees that timing on every pole. Make sure the ECTs are within a few degrees and the IATs, the inlet air temperature, is within a few degrees when you begin the pole. And then just make sure that your start RPM and your end RPM is basically the same. That way you don't have one starting at 1,000, generating a little bit more heat or allowing a little bit more timing advance if the knock sensors are active. By the time you get to 7,000, 7,500 RPM, than you do in the duration of a pole that's from 3,000 to 7,000.
Yeah. So we've been blabbing for a little while here.
Yeah.
You guys, we want to take some questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Let's do that. All right. Dan writes in, he wants to know, hey guys, what's your opinion on boosting a GT350? Can that Voodoo motor handle it as well as the Gen 2 Coyote? And Justin, why didn't you ever boost your GT350?
This is a great question, Dan. It's one we talk about a lot.
We were explicitly asked by a representative of Ford not to boost our GT350, under the pretense that if we did, we will probably have engine problems.
Yeah, you know, I bought my GT350 in December of, 15, I guess, when they came out.
Yeah.
Actually, Thanksgiving Day, I think the car got delivered, and I traded our 13 GT500 for it, thinking that it was going to be the next hot Shelby to mod. And, you know, supercharging, I mean, just bring all the power. And from the market standpoint, the car was kind of like the Boss. Not a lot of people modified them very early on. And then when we found out that the engine was kind of like glass, it just was it was a no-brainer. I mean, there's just not, the market doesn't justify the R&D to even try and, you know, get past all those issues. It's a, you know, I had somebody calling to asking us about tuning one with a blower, and making watt power is easy, right?
Yeah.
But tuning for drivability, mapping that whole GT350 engine, it's totally different than a Coyote.
Yeah.
And there's just, we haven't seen the market to justify it.
So what you're saying is the cross plane is going to be more durable than the flat plane.
Yes, and I've heard that the road race, the race teams at road race GT350s with the 5.2 Voodoo are actually converting them to Coyote cranks.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Heard a lot of that going on. I mean, there was some crazy stuff with that car. There's a special process that Ford uses to make the tubular headers so they don't vibrate and crack.
What?
Yes.
So they have to worry about resonant frequency of the engine cracking a stainless header?
Yes. Yeah. There's so much weird engineering stuff with the GT350. It sounds cool being flat plane and everything, but no thank you.
If you want a durable engine to not have to worry about, your better bet, at least if you're looking at Ford stuff, is a cross-plane 5-liter.
Yeah, so, I mean, 15 to 17 Coyote, a hot ticket.
Word through the grapevine is the supercharged 5.2-liter that's coming out here soon is supposed to be cross-plane. So I think that tells you everything you need to know about whether or not you should throw boost at your flat plane.
Yeah, and that, you know, we're talking about another deal here, so this goes into a little bit NA builds, 5.0 versus 5.2.
Very little difference in power, in my opinion, if any.
I mean, I've got Rebecca has 5.2 heads on her car, Voodoo heads. The flow numbers on the flow bench aren't that much better. I don't feel like the engine power is that much better. They take a special camshaft. We got some weird ass camshafts in there right now. You know, on paper, the 5.2's got a bigger bore, which can improve airflow out of the valve, but I mean, it's also got a thinner sleeve.
Yeah.
So your whole setup's not as strong inside there. Good. You want to hit the next question?
Yep. Dale wants to know, he's very interested to hear about the 2018s with possibly a Gen 3 TVS.
We have one. But not with our Gen 3 TVS.
Yeah.
I guess more to come on that?
Yeah, more to come.
All right. Devin says, stripe delete Shelby for the win.
I agree.
All right, Jose. So everyone is hyped up over the 18 intake manifold for older generation Coyotes. Will they require a tune update?
Depends what you qualify as require a tune update. Will they physically run and drive with an intake manifold swap as long as you're using the same throttle body and injectors? Yes.
A lot of stuff will physically run and drive without touching the tune.
Yeah.
I mean...
But should you get it updated or at least have someone take a peek at data logs? Absolutely.
Yeah, especially on 11 to 14, that's going to be a lot more airflow up top.
Exactly. You're going to be going from like power tapering off at 6,500 to power staying pretty consistent.
Yeah.
All the way to 75.
That tends to find limits of other things.
That, and I want to say 11 to 14 cars, if you're on a stock tune, you're going to be RPM limited to about 7,200.
Yeah.
So you're not even going to see the full potential of an 18 intake manifold with the stock limiter.
The factory Ford and Roush tunes do not do the Coyote justice in like any form.
In stock form they do.
Yeah.
But in the whole intake manifold changing game of the world, they don't really do much for you.
You got to get that rev limiter up there.
All right, Michael Webb saying he has a S550 that runs high nines at 140. What roll bar or cages do you recommend and that are people-friendly, user-friendly?
That's a tough one.
Maybe Watson?
Well, and Watson's...
There's bolt-in?
Watson's is bolt-in. You basically have to delete the rear seat, and it does not have swing outs. Watson does not believe in swing outs from a rigidity, safety standpoint. And I'll tell you, especially if you're a big person, you know, you really need swing outs. If you're gonna have a street car, that's a whole other thing. But Maximum Motorsports has got some really nice stuff. Have you seen anything else out there?
No, maybe hit up a fab shop to get it installed.
Yeah.
I know TIG Vision does good stuff.
I mean, get with a custom cage builder. You know, most tracks want to see you have some safety equipment, you know, until you get into like the low 8s and the 7s and the low 7s. That's when you need to have like everything by the book. Above that, there may be some leeway for a street car, but.
And then
Anthony writes in, does the GT500 148 fit the Coyote with the TVS? Also, he upgraded his fuel pump to a Deutschwerks 415. Do I need to get it retuned?
you very, very likely need to get it retuned, depending on who's tuning it. If we're tuning it, I want a data log with fuel pressure measured by a sensor, and the GT500 cold air intakes will physically fit on a rear inlet positive displacement supercharged Coyote car. The heat shields are different.
Yep, heat shields are different. I think JLT may have some heat shield options.
Okay.
And this is 11 to 14 Coyote that you can use that big 148, because 15 up Coyote, you could somehow make it fit, but
it won't fit out of the box.
Yeah.
You'll need different couplers and stuff like that.
yeah, it's you actually need like a 45 off the throttle body.
All right, Jeff wants to know, on Rebecca's car, is it on E85 or race gas, and also what kind of headers is she running?
It's on E98 with a 1 7/8 Dynatech header. And I actually had Kooks talking to me. I was talking to Kooks about headers today. Dynatech 1 7/8 have made a lot of power.
All of it.
But the question is, would it benefit from something bigger? So we may have to answer that sooner or later. We'll see.
All right, Poor Boy 313 says, what's up, VMP? He'd like to say thank you for the power package combo with the SCT X4 scanner and PMAS intake for his 2013 GT 6-speed. He dynoed at 392 and 378.
Nice. Nice.
Good to hear.
All right. Adam says he loves the show. What's cool is Ford started the development of the Coyote in 2008.
Mm-hmm. I know that they had twin turbo Coyotes a long time ago.
I've heard rumors of that over the years.
Yeah.
Alex chimed in. He says there is no issue boosting GT350s as none have had an engine failure to date due to boost.
Okay.
All right, Scott writes in, he's got a 2018 Mustang GT. He wants to run E85. He wants to add a power adder within the next year, but what would he need to run E85 until he decides which direction he really wants to go?
So what type of car did he say it was?
He's got a 2018 GT that he wants to put a power adder on down the road in maybe about a year, but what would he need currently to run E85 until he makes that jump?
A tune. That's all you'll need to run E85 currently.
So, and an 18 is unique because it's got two fuel systems, basically, a high pressure and a low pressure system.
And even the low pressure is higher than it was previously.
Yep. There's a lot of fuel available. It runs out fast, but it's there.
Yeah.
Jason wants to know, do you guys offer the 18 manifold with an install kit and a tune?
We're looking at offering that.
Zachary says he just purchased a 2018 GT350. What are the first mods he needs to do? Price is not a factor.
Octane and a cold air, if you want to throw some money at it. I mean, there's not really... The car leaves from Ford as a good car. They leave on a good cal. Just throw some octane in it and throw a tune on it.
Yeah, there's some power and some little things I like to do in the calibration. Any of the factory calibrations out there have some, I don't want to call them torque limits because everybody talks about that, but there's various things that Ford does to soften them up that we get rid of. Like, okay, so here's a good one, clutch protection. That shit's the devil,
Yeah.
basically.
If you're going to beat on your car, that stuff isn't fun.
Dorian says he wants to know, Joe, are you going to put a roll bar in your truck?
No.
I'm kind of worried about my truck.
Yeah, your truck's got a lot more weight to carry it down the track than mine does.
Yeah.
Not to say that having a roll bar makes it less safe, but I don't want that life.
Yeah, well, and you could actually mount harness bar essentially in your truck and have something that's a lot safer to race. I don't have anything to attach a 5-point harness to behind the driver.
All right, Alan writes in, he goes, what cams do you guys recommend for an 11 through 14 Cobra Jet intake car without losing so much torque in the bottom end?
Oh, so we have some data on that. Chris, do you want to cue the horsepower first? Okay, so this is not a Cobra Jet intake manifold car, but this is a Boss car. And this is a car I actually did a year ago, or years ago, before all the options were available. You know what? I stand corrected. This car was converted to the Cobra Jet intake, and it made about 500 at the wheels. It had comp stage 3 intake and exhaust cams. So big, burbly cams. Now, here's the kicker. It had the, not lockouts, but limiters installed. So the cams could not move as much, which I think you'd agree, Joe, for the exhaust side, not
too terribly big of a deal, but
not really a big deal. Yeah. The however, for the intake side, it's not pretty.
it'll leave some torque on the table down low.
I don't know if you've seen this graph yet, but I'll have Chris bring it up.
Yeah, I have not seen that graph yet.
So do you have the torque one, Chris? It's called torque loss below 5,000 RPM. So anyways, the end result of locking out those cams, I think we lost about 20 to 30 foot-pounds of torque. Actually, we lost, yeah, quite a bit. So the solution to that
is to leave the TIVCT active.
Let TIVC work for you. Beyond that, to answer the original question, comp stage 3 cams work good. We also use L&M cams. They've got, L&M is a custom engine builder, and they can basically make recommendations based on what you're trying to do. And they do intake only cams and then intake and exhaust cams.
All right, Peyton wants to know, Joe, have you put your truck on the dyno yet?
Yeah. 600 wheel.
Stock exhaust?
Well, stock exhaust up to the muffler. It's an MBRP side exit exhaust, but it still has cats, still has manifolds, all that stuff.
Now, what size pulley were you using on that?
That was on I want to say it's an 82 or a 79. I want to say it's 82.
That's really mild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah.
I mean, all the F-150 stuff with a 2.3 liter blower like our Gen 2 or a Gen 2R is in that 75 to 82 range. It's like 600 to 630 wheel. If you're going to be towing a lot or running 91 octane, we'll keep the timing a little softer. You'll be around 570, 580 rear wheel horsepower.
Race truck.
Peyton also would like to know, being that the S550 is on its 4th year, when do you think Ford will come out with the next chassis code?
2022. I think the Mach 1 is going to be on the same chassis, and I believe that's set for release of 2020.
There's like Ford keeps shoving new stuff in there. I mean, 2018 we got a new front end. What else did we get that was new?
New cluster.
New cluster option, yeah. All digital cluster.
New transmission for MT82. It was a supposed redesign, and then they got a twin disc clutch. And then the transmission's different ratio. 5th gear is no longer 1-to-1, 4th gear is.
I think they did that for gas mileage.
I think so too.
Because the Coyote was kind of badass with a closely spaced 5 forward gears. Of course, they broke.
Yeah.
But
only when people really started beating on them or throwing power at them, though.
I mean, we got, what, 9 years out of the S197?
Yeah.
It was a good 9 years. It started out as a 3-valve, ended up as a 14 GT500.
Then, I mean, we got 9-10 years out of SN95. Because you had all the way from 94 to 2004.
Yeah.
So if history is any indication of the future, you'll probably get 9-10 years out of a chassis.
All right, Nick writes in, he's got a 2014 automatic. He wants to know 18 manifold or Cobra Jet, and is it worth port matching the stock throttle body if you are porting the manifolds?
CJ above all.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you've got the hood clearance for it, like an 11 to 14 car, no drop motor mounts, you know, and you're willing to spend the money.
Yeah, I mean, if you're balling on a budget, 18 manifolds decent from what we've seen. It's certainly not a step backwards, but if you want every available horsepower, Cobra Jet's probably your best bet.
Steve wants to know, how do you guys like the intake-only cams? Are you seeing positive results with naturally aspirated?
I have not tested intake-only cams naturally aspirated.
Yeah, haven't tested that yet. You know, most of the people that have been doing intake-only cams
I've been blower.
Yeah, it was kind of sold as a blower upgrade deal, and we'd have to go back and talk to Michael and Sean and see if that was the intention there. I mean, I know blowers, they benefit a lot from camshaft changes.
They do.
All right, Jeff writes in, he's got an 01 5.4 powered F-150. He says, when doing a wide open throttle from first to second, it shifts very harshly. I mean, braking stuff hard. If the same wide open throttle first to second shift is made with the selector, it shifts normal. Is this a tuning issue? By the way, it's refreshing seeing a blower Coyote car in the bottom eights instead of turbo. Speaking of Rebecca's car, amazing.
Well, thank you very much on that. We've worked hard around here to accomplish that, and I think that's a very elite club essentially. If you look at the fastest Coyotes lists, there's not much else out there with a blower. I think
most of it's Cobra Jet stuff.
Yeah, Cobra Jets and like Jimmy LaRocca's Cobra Jet. To answer the question, an 0154. We're talking 4R70W stuff.
Or 4R75. Or 4R100.
Oh, yeah.
It really depends on which package he has.
So those trucks, yeah, because they came with any of those transmissions.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really hard to say, and it could be tied up in a mechanical issue too.
Although changing whether you select it or whether it does it automatically makes me think it's some type of modifier, but I'm not aware of a modifier in EEC5 that changes it whether you shift on the selector or you shift via the drive strategy.
Well, and there's something else with a lot of my transmissions. If you have less torque input, your shift will actually get harder. So if it's shifting late because an accumulators has a leak, as were 4R70s known to have, not necessarily from that era, beforehand were really bad, but yeah, then I agree though on the tuning too, it's hard to know.
All right, Slab Shack writes in, he says, with the torque coming in so early in the power band from his 14 GT500, would you leave the stock gears alone for quarter mile improvement?
I probably would. What do you think?
I'd run it through a ET mile an hour calculator and see if you would stand to gain anything significant by swapping the gears. If you're going to be moving from 5,000 RPM when you go through the traps to like 6,200, it may be worth doing gears, but you also have to look towards your future goals with the car and determine that if your future goal trap speed or horsepower that equals a trap speed is going to put you past the point of where you have to shift based on the gear change you're thinking about doing, then maybe just stick with the gears you have for now.
Rule of thumb when drag racing is try to go through the traps at or around peak horsepower.
All right, CMO117 wants to know, Joe, is it worth having you tune my 2010 F-150 4.6 2-valve swapped Mustang? His mods are 70mm plenum, throttle body, BBK, cold air, off-road X-pipe, and blown out Flowmaster catback.
If you're still in the stock tune, yes. If you have a tune on it, without knowing what whoever's doing to it's doing, I can't tell you whether or not it's going to be worth it to change tuners.
Truck tunes of that era,
well, it's a truck swap into a Mustang.
Yeah. Right, yeah. So at that whole era, the tunes, factory tunes weren't great.
Yeah.
Ryan wants to add to the 18 versus Cobra Jet question. If we're comparing overall price, would you do an 18 manifold with L&M intake cams or just the Cobra Jet?
Oh, so now we're mixing combinations.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to be up, I'd say similar money, but still more on the 18 manifold setup. But your peak power is probably going to be higher just because of cams.
And I think the big variable here is who's going to install cams.
Yeah.
If you can do it yourself, save a bunch of money. If you got to pay somebody, it's a big job.
Yeah.
What do we charge here in the shop for cam installs?
I'm not even sure.
I think, so it's similar to an oil pump gear install because you got to retime everything, plus the time of pulling the cam covers off, but and unbolting everything and replacing it. I'd say around $750 to $1,000 is, is the going rate, just straight labor hours wise. I mean, it's 6 to 8 hours for a good tech to do that top to bottom.
Yeah.
And in a GT500, it's even more.
It is significantly more.
Chad says no audio.
The audio went away.
I think it's okay on YouTube. I think that we're running into issues on Facebook.
Bandwidth, okay.
But I will tell you that our YouTube stream is extremely pixelated, almost like when you travel overseas and you're trying to do a live stream.
Okay.
Our YouTube just went.
So, do we want to keep doing questions? Or do we need to troubleshoot that?
I think that since you have audio on YouTube still, that you might want to go ahead and continue with questions. If you reboot, you're going to lose your whole stream.
Okay. So we can just keep on trucking with the questions that we have. Are
no one can hear you. Okay.
Is that through Facebook?
Yeah, and Adrian on YouTube is saying that it's a real clean stream there for him today.
Okay. So what do we got for questions on the Facebook side of things?
All right, Bill says, hello, Justin. You did all the work on his Shelby. I was your first customer with your second generation supercharger. Do you recommend me putting in 1,000cc injectors?
Hey, Bill. Nice to hear from you. The short answer is only if you need them. We don't want to over-injector the car.
Although within reason, ID1000s wouldn't necessarily be overkill.
That's true. They do drive good for an injector that big.
Exactly, but by that same token, if you don't need them, there's no sense in spending money on them.
Injectors aren't going to add power by themselves.
Yeah, exactly. You got to match that with airflow to get a gain from putting an injector in the car. So I would say basically what Justin was saying, don't worry about putting injectors in it if you haven't changed anything with the car.
All right, Colin wants to know, have either of you ever tuned a 5.4 NA build like a Navigator? And are you familiar with the adapter plates to run Coyote style intakes on a Navigator setup?
Yes and yes, MMR makes them.
Have you seen any power numbers out of them?
Not out of the Coyote intake on there, but I've tuned 5.4 4 valves and 5.4 2 valves naturally aspirated.
What did you see for number wise?
Not dyno, email. Yeah.
So I did a Navi motor naturally aspirated back in the day, many years ago. We got around 330 real horsepower, naturally aspirated. I think the compression was average. The cams were probably like, pick of the litter factory cams, like 96, 98 Cobra. The intake manifold was probably something just mildly worked over. Could have even been a Sullivan, actually. That one used to be big.
The Sullivans were big back then.
Now, I did something kind of cool after I did that for that customer. I'm like, oh, what had the ultimate 5.4 NA production motor in it?
Cobra R?
Yes. I did a couple Cobra Rs. They make 380 to 400 at the wheel naturally aspirated, which was a big deal, 10 years ago when we had no Coyote.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And that Cobra R just worked, man. It just ran away from that regular 5.4.
Them cams, though, and them heads.
Next question.
That's it for now. All right.
Oh, wait. I got one. Benny writes in, he's got a Shelby GT500 07. He wants 550 to 580 wheel horsepower. What does he need? Today, he has a 2.6 pulley off-road H-pipe and cold air intake.
the easiest things to do are going to be what we call a 72 elbow on our website. So it's an upgraded elbow for your stock supercharger. You do a little bit of port matching on the flange where it bolts on. And then I'd bolt a twin 67mm throttle body to that and some headers. And that's a pretty solid recipe to guarantee 550, 570 wheel and a decent quality fuel.
Yeah, and then, I mean, that's about all that stock blower's got.
Yeah.
A lot of people used to put lower pulleys on, and I mean, that stock blower hit like a torque monster, but it's still just not efficient to make a whole lot more power up top.
And I think he had mentioned that he has a 2.6, so he could go down to a 2.5
Yeah.
if he has a stock lower on there.
We make a 2.5 stock look pulley, gets you another half a pound to a pound of boost.
Yeah.
All right, Nathan writes in, he's got a P1SC Pro Charger on a 16 Coyote with a 1300 horsepower intercooler. The smallest pulley you're using without IAT being too warm or without belt slip. Also, while keeping everything on the safe side, IAT temps or overspinning issues. 16 F-150 heads and cams, Mustang GT short block, ID 1050s, Walbro 450 pump, and connecting rods and all the supporting mods.
So is his primary question there the inlet air temperatures?
I think
with
so.
overspinning
Yes.
the blower?
Yeah.
I mean, as long as I assume by overspinning the blower, you're running a wastegated setup to regulate pressure down to something that's safe for your fuel.
I think it's hard
I don't
to
really
say.
see much
Yeah.
IAT issues with setups like that. I mean, they're going to build inlet air temperatures quicker than a car that's running less pulley when the wastegate's shut. But just cruising around town, I don't believe your inlet air temperature should be any higher than they were previously.
Yeah, I mean, I've done some of those Pro Chargers with the smaller intercooler. No bueno. But the bigger intercooler seems to work better. But I think the Coyote just needs a bigger head unit.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you shove some air in a Coyote.
He was talking about P1, I believe.
Yeah, P1.
Yeah, throw a D1 or an F1 on that thing and party.
Yes.
Back to the 01 F-150 5.4 shifting issue. Jeff writes back, he says, the truck is pro-charged, has 42-pound injectors and a Lightning MAF, so he can't go back to factory tune to eliminate a tune issue. Could logging be something you could do to look at it for me?
Not really. I mean, the EEC5 ECUs that are automatic, they have a torque calculation that needs to be correct for the transmission to shift properly. If the torque calculation is not correct, it will do something kind of like you're describing where it will shift too hard or too soft. Can you think of anything? I can't think of anything that we can log to see if the torque calculation's incorrect.
You just need to get a hold of somebody that can help you diagnose the vehicle in person.
Yeah, I mean, based on what he's describing, it sounds like whoever tuned the MAF injectors and spark tables, but maybe doesn't know about the torque table for the transmission shifting logic, or just kind of put it where he thought it should be.
Yeah.
So I would say first step would be get in touch with your tuner and have them look at it.
All right, Enar writes in, he says, hey guys, I asked Justin previously about your GT350 tune, and he talked about lifting the RPM to 8,500. So my question is, wouldn't a bigger set of cams take better advantage of the RPM band that you're running in?
They potentially could. Depends on what the cams are ground for and what you phase them for.
I think we mentioned that on the last show, didn't we? That L&M's working on GT350 cams. So if I still had my car, I'd put them in there to see what happens.
Yeah.
At the time, though, right before I sold my car, I checked, and that was almost a year ago.
No one made cams.
No one made cams.
Nathan writes in, he goes, yay for all the power adder questions on NA day.
Hey, I mean, it goes to show, what the Mustang community is all about.
And at the end of the day, we're here to answer their questions.
Yeah.
So
I mean, we'll answer all kinds of questions on Tuning Tuesday.
we're just trying to get your guys' gears turning on certain topics. If you have anything you thought of last week while you're in the bathroom but forgot to ask us about now.
All right, back to Inara with the GT350 cams. So far, very little, if anything, is available. You would think this high RPM air pump would see big gains from bigger cams in a combination with long tubes and a good tune.
You would think.
Yeah.
But Ford also knew that people were going to be spinning these things high, and the cam's probably pretty good for high RPM as it sits.
I will tell you, the GT350 does not have a lot of torque down low, and that's always an indication to me of how how it's more aimed for high-end horsepower.
Yeah.
All right, Jason wants to know, what RPM does a stock NA 15 to 17 Coyote quit making power?
Depends what you consider quit making power. You'll see the power curve start to taper off around 6,700. But that's not to say you should shift it right at 6,700 because you want to keep and maintain the highest average horsepower and average torque. So in order to maintain that, when you're talking about a curve that looks like this, you don't shift at the peak of the curve. You shift just past it to bring you right overlapping for the highest average.
I mean, we had a stock NA 2015 for a little while before we tore it down to build a race car. It felt darn good shifting at 7,500 with all the clutch protection off and all the other BS.
Yeah, that and I mean, I want to say that shifting around 7,200 on a stock intake manifold car is, I'd say, the conservative sweet spot. You can shift at 74, still get some decent gains out of it, but they try to overanalyze stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, where do I make peak power? I'm going to shift exactly there. No, don't do that.
There's probably more value in the driver mod than worrying about a few hundred RPM.
Yeah.
Shifting faster.
Yeah.
And your good customer, Bill Shiner, just writes back, Justin, he just asked you to give him a phone call when you're able to, and we're a little caught up on our questions at this point. Oh, wait a minute.
Just got a bunch that just came in.
A couple just came in. All right, Chad writes in, what is the max horsepower torque build on a VMP NA Coyote setup?
Well,
I don't think we've really built a max effort naturally aspirated setup before.
we've talked about it.
Yeah.
It would be a cool project because there was a story a couple of years ago that kind of let everybody down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
You talking about the LS versus Coyote one? Or
Yeah,
another one?
yeah, the LS versus Coyote one.
Yeah, we're going to spend thousands of dollars on a rotating assembly that we don't need.
I mean, Chad, I would theorize if you went into it knowing what we know now with all the options available to us, cylinder head porting, cams, intake manifolds, I think we could hit 550 with a streetable setup.
Yeah.
And, okay, let's define streetable. I know there's some people out there building like 13 and 14 to 1 NA Coyotes, and those things are going to be bad mofos.
So are you saying that streetable is kind of dependent on octane? Because are you thinking that in order to classify something as streetable, you should be able to run it on a pump fuel like 93?
Well,
maybe not make peak power on a pump 93, but...
That's a good question. I'm thinking somebody that can bolt it onto their everyday driver, and that car can still be their everyday driver. Because, let's be honest, the race car shit goes downhill fast.
Yeah.
Where you're towing it to the racetrack, and yes, you can drive exactly.
50 to 70 wheel.
A decent amount of boosts.
Pounds, 20 pounds. Or no, 700 wheel on
2012.
So probably closer to 18 pounds of boost.
Yeah, depending on the. Did he say what power adder he's got?
No, he did not.
Yeah.
All right, Jonas wants to know, what can I expect out of my 15 F-150 with a Stage 1 Roush supercharger package?
Is he saying stock? What can he expect it to make at the wheel with the Roush Stage 1 package?
I think so.
Probably 525, 540
Yeah.
wheel tops.
I think my truck dynoed right around 525.
Yeah.
Now, you're going to want to get a tune on that thing as soon as possible. Roush keeps the stock rev limiter at 6,000 RPM.
Yeah, it happens.
He's same guy also on that F-150, he goes with a VMP tune.
With a VMP tune, about 550, 565 rear wheel. I've seen them as high as 575 if you do a pulley at the same time with the Roush head unit.
Yeah, I mean, in Roush Phase 1 versus Phase 2 is 5 millimeter of pulley size. The cal is almost identical.
Yeah, there's a lot of small changes, but nothing monumental.
I mean, the F-150 is kind of a unique beast. It's a less efficient motor than a Mustang motor. So like Joe and I were talking about volumetric efficiency and stuff like that earlier. When you boost something, you're just kind of magnifying what it already has. So the F-150 has smaller cams, lower compression. So don't throw as much boost at it as you want, I guess is my point.
Yeah.
Do you want to see
that will make up for the inadequacies of the F-150 engine.
Let me just,
Larry Doran writes in, he goes, has his car made it to the dyno yet? LOL. He says he'll be patient though and wait for the results.
If I recall correctly, there is a car currently on the dyno, and after that car comes off, we're going to get started on his 93.
Yep.
All right, Sean writes in, he's got a 2017 Performance Pack. He's doing a Cobra Jet setup. Currently, he has the Cobra Jet manifold, twin 67, PMAS cold air intake for the Cobra Jet, Ford LU47s, VMP throttle body, wiring harness, UPR catch can, catless long tubes, Corsa, catback, and plenty of suspension, etc., etc. He's going to have John at London Racing remote tune it through an N-Gauge for 93 and E85. Is there anything I'm missing from my parts list for a successful and flawless install?
Get with your tuner on that, but based on the parts list that you just rattled off to me, everything that you would need to run E85 on that setup sounds like it's there.
Hey, at least he's asking.
Yeah, yeah. Although he's not asking his tuner.
Yes, you should go to your tuner first because they're going to be the end-all be-all. And, you know, you've picked a tuner, so.
But if I was going to tune that setup, it sounds like everything that you need to run that car in E85 and make a good number is there.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree.
All right, Nathan writes back in. He's a gentleman that was talking about the Pro Charger and IATs earlier. He said he was told that pulling down his P1 was spinning it too hard and would be leading to high IATs. Curious what your experience with the P1 and tuning them if you were ever having high IATs running E85 also. Just getting another opinion and your experience.
P1s with the small intercooler generate a lot of heat at watt. Have I given a big enough of a, I won't say it, to look at what IATs are cruising down the road at 60 miles an hour after the car's been running for 30 minutes? No. My primary concern when I'm tuning a car on the dyno to get a power number versus a power number is IATs at watt versus IATs at watt. And IATs at watt on a P1 that's being spun pretty hard with a stock intercooler are pretty high. My experience with the 1200 horsepower intercooler with the P1 SC are 0.
I mean, and Nathan, it's really good that he's asking these questions. You know, sometimes the answer is right in front of you. Data log your own car.
Yeah, I mean, you have the car, data log your inlet air temperatures and compare it to what they were on the old intercooler setup, and that'll get you the answer that you're looking for. But based on my experience, the stock intercooler that comes with the Stage 1 kit works, but it doesn't work well enough for cars on high boost. Your car being on high boost with a 1200 horsepower intercooler, it sounds like you're doing everything you can to keep IATs down. What the end result of that IAT ends up being is really dependent on your car, your driving style, and how much boost you're pulleyed for. All of which you know and all of which you have information, or all of which you have the ability to capture. So I just suggest data logging the car and taking a peek for yourself.
All right, Moser Motors of Portland writes in, should I run an additive to my fuel? He has a 2017 GT Gen 2 Stage 2 VMP 2.3 TVS with catless headers and off-road mid pipes.
So he's probably making some decent power.
Yeah.
Stage 2 comes with a better fuel system in the sense of a booster and a better heat exchanger. So he's like Stage 1 is 85 millimeter pulley only. That's really all I want to see on Stage 1. But Stage 2, you could do an 82 or 79. Additive. I mean, it'd still be nice to have more information, right?
Yeah. Did he mention octane or just wondering what additive to use?
No.
Just wondering about the additive.
What was the screen name?
Moser Motors of Portland.
Portland.
They recently ordered a tune for a stage kit. I can't remember what octane they were on, but if it's Portland, Oregon, it's probably 91.
Yeah.
Octane additives run Torco or VP Octanium.
Yeah. That will help. You'll need a tune to take full advantage of it, but the NOx sensors will take a small advantage of it.
All right, Kenneth Burton writes in, he says he loves Tuning Tuesday show. His question is about a 2018 GT with a JLT intake and E85 tune. What's the expected quarter mile times? It's a base model with 315 gears. Just a rough estimate.
He said it was automatic?
Does not say.
Okay, there's a very big difference between the automatic cars and manual. The manual depends very largely on driver ability and the tire that's on the car. An automatic car without a tune is probably going to run, again, a lot of factors, DA, how well the car hooks up. But we can, like, if you're on the stock tires, around 1,500 to 2,000 DA, it's probably going to run like 12.4. If you're...
I'd even say, and what year was it again? 17?
Is that 17 or 18?
Where are we at? It's an 18.
18,
So
okay.
An 18 with an auto at around 2,000 feet DA stock.
I would say low 12s. You know, maybe there's actually about 0.2 difference between regular mode and drag mode.
Yep. So a cautious estimate would be 12.4 to 12.2. If you have a decent DA, it's automatic, it's in track mode, and you don't weigh a whole lot, and the car hooks up like 12.1, 12.0, as low as 11.9, depending on how happy the car is.
I mean, let's be honest, the 18's pretty badass from the factory.
It is.
That's why people are running low 11s and high 10s. I mean, that's kind of been the thing on the internet lately.
That, and these are, again, times quoted on an automatic car. The manual is, I've seen guys run 14s manual, and on the same car, another guy get in it and run 12s.
We actually ran a manual with I'd call him a pro driver.
Mm-hmm.
And the car went 12.5. That's all it had in it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you take
What's that pro driver's like second pass in the car though? Do you think he could have shaved off any more time if he had more seat time?
Based on the data logs, no.
Okay.
He left on a stock tire under basically full-on launch control. Like it was putting out as much power as it could. It was kind of cool to see the data logs.
In today's thing.
Chris writes in, he's got a 14 with an automatic, and he wants to know what would be more beneficial as a first mod, cold air intake PMOS and a tune, or off-road mid-pipe and a tune?
Cold air intake, PMOS, and a tune. So was he just saying like which cold air intake
he was using that as a brand reference.
Okay.
I mean, I think I know what the answer is.
Yeah, I mean the stock cold air is perfectly fine. The PMOS adds a little bit of power, but whether or not it's worth it is up to you, and whether or not that, I want to say it's around $300 for a cold air intake. If you can justify $300 for, we'll call it 10, 15 horsepower, by all means get the PMOS. If that's kind of like on the fuzzy line of what you're able to total up and justify for what we'll call 35, 40 horsepower total, depending on your fuel quality, then make that decision.
And you know, we're just going to talk about an off-road pipe. On a stock car, I think we're talking about as little as 7 rear-wheel horsepower from taking off the cats.
Yeah.
And your car's going to smell, it's going to be louder, you know. It sounds cool in practice, but yeah.
It does make the car a little bit more consistent in extended racing. Like if you're
That's
going to be
true.
doing back-to-back rolls or road coursing the car, you will use less fuel.
Yeah,
road coursing the car.
No longer have cat protection. I have actually had a hard time seeing a difference there on the road course.
In theory, if you're driving a car that's in cat protection, it's 10 to 15% less fuel consumption.
Yeah, I know. And I actually ran around the track at a couple different Lambdas and to see if I could see a difference.
I assume that was on the Boss?
The Boss, yeah.
Nice.
All right, Wild Soul 99 writes in, I have a 2012 GT manual with 331 gears, Cobra Jet intake, VMP 67, and headers on 93 tuned by VMP. The car idles roughly, and when coming to a stop, puts it in neutral and it will stall. Do you know what that could be?
I know that if you send me a data log, I could probably fix it.
It looks like we got a couple more Facebook questions, and then we time to finish up.
Yep.
Okay.
We getting pretty close?
We have, we have about 3 more YouTube questions and I think 2 Facebook questions. And that's
Okay.
Okay.
All right, Peyton wants to know, when coyote swapping into older cars, does VMP have to worry about government emission regulations such as catalytic converters?
If your car is pre-emissions, there are no laws that require emissions components
Yeah.
if you have a pre-emissions vehicle.
And I want to say there's certain laws in place for engine swaps where if the engine is from a newer model vehicle, you can get away with a couple things because you're using an engine that is technically supposed to be more efficient.
Yeah, and some of that stuff gets really state by state complicated.
Yeah, I mean, technically, from an EPA standpoint, if a vehicle has a VIN number, you are not supposed to replace the engine with anything other than the engine that came out of that vehicle.
Yeah,
But,
yeah. If it's pre-emissions, nobody cares.
Yeah.
All right, Peyton wants to know, what gains have you seen from porting intake manifolds such as stock, Boss, and the 18s?
So like we said, we're going to be doing some testing on that. Joe, have you seen any numbers from any of the remote tunes you've done?
No, nothing that was apples to apples.
We're hearing it's around 7 to 15 rear wheel. So we'll get a chance to test that specifically, but that's what we're hearing.
Yeah.
All right, Rick wants to know, why is a return fuel system needed for E85? There are some guys on a GT500 forum that say they are running E85 with only a fuel pump booster.
Those guys probably have 1314s.
Yeah, 1314s have kind of badass pumps in the tank already. And on lower boost levels, you can get away with that. But
yeah, if you're running a 07 to 12 car and you're running, call it anything above 14 pounds of boost, you basically need a fuel system to run E85.
And I mean, fuel system upgrade, you don't have to worry about running out of fuel. You don't have to worry about transients, because a returnless fuel system is kind of a finicky thing when you run it at the ragged edge.
Yeah, and I feel like people think that they get like conspiracy theory, like, why can they do it but I can't? Chances are it's a completely different setup, or what your end goal is completely different from them. We don't tell people they need fuel systems because we think it's fun.
Yeah.
We tell them largely based on fact that, hey, if you try to run your car on this setup, you will run out of fuel and you may blow your shit up.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're coming to us for advice, so, you know, we want to give you the advice that's appropriate for what you're doing and safe for your vehicle.
But to directly answer your question, why are you seeing some people able to run it and you not? Probably different circumstances, and it's probably a 1314.
All right, Sean's revisiting the Cobra Jet setup. Did you guys say to find another tuner? Also, what are the average quarter mile times and trap speeds you see come out of a solid CJ car with minor weight reduction and a good driver and decent street slick? Granted, the DA is decent. Thanks.
Which guy with the Cobra Jet question was it?
It's just about the, let's see here, Sean. Let me see what his previous question was. This was the gentleman who wrote in earlier that gave you a complete list of stuff. He had the Cobra Jet intake, the Twin 67.
This is the guy that wanted to, sorry John, I'll shortcut you. This is the guy that wanted to ask another tuner how to set up his car when he had already picked a tuner.
Right.
No, we're not telling you to pick another tuner. We're telling you that if you're getting tuned by someone else, don't ask another tuner if your setup has everything that it should to be tuned. Ask the people that you're going to be getting tuned by.
Yeah.
All I was telling you is that if I was tuning the car, based on what you described, everything that I would want to see on the car is there. But I don't know if Lund will share that opinion. I'd imagine that they would, because what works, works. But I can't give you that answer.
And I think his track times would be in the 10s if he can drive it.
Yeah, I mean, if you can drive it upper 10s, but really depends on the whole setup of the car and how good you are at driving the car.
So we're about almost 10 minutes over, Joe.
Oh man, I got shit to do.
Larry Duran wants to see his car on the dyno today.
Yeah. We'll get it done then. So I guess as a wrap, we did Shelby Fest this week, so expect some delays in everything.
Yeah. Yeah, Shelby Fest took up a lot of time. We're working hard on your tunes.
We got a lot of tunes to do. A lot of tunes to do.
We appreciate your input and your questions, and throw more of it at us. We want to get that intake manifold testing done. So I'll have to see if all the intake manifolds came in. Subscribe to us on YouTube, like us on Facebook, check out our Instagram.